Good afternoon. This is Pamela Bluewater at the home of Joseph in Egypt. Joseph is the youngest son of Jacob and Rachel. After a long journey from Canaan into Egypt, he is now working for the Pharaoh of Egypt, interpreting dreams. We are here to discuss his story about his 11 brothers and an eventual forgiveness for selling him into slavery. Welcome.
Thank you.
I would like to talk to you about brotherly love and what happened with you and your 11 brothers and sisters that went wrong.
Well, Ms. Bluewater, that's easy to explain. Siblings are often jealous, envious rivals. It started with the story of Cain and Abel, you know. It was at an early age that I had a couple of dreams where my brothers would be bowing down to me, and others would as well. When I told them about it, they hated me for it. I guess it's the idea of domination in the dreams that they resented.
But it was only a dream, you said?
Yes, but they took it the wrong way and hated me for it. First, they threw me into a cistern, and then they sold me to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver.
Well, that's awful, and that's not brotherly love. So you were doomed?
Well, it turns out the Lord must have been working behind the scenes on my behalf the whole time, because the Ishmaelites sold me to one of the Pharaoh's officials by the name of Potiphar, whose wife accused me of seducing her, and he put me in prison. My skill of interpreting dreams for the Pharaoh's chief cupbearer in prison soon came to the attention of the Pharaoh himself.
Then how and why did the Pharaoh accept you?
Well, the most important dream of the Pharaoh saved my life. He dreamt of 7 cows and 7 heads of grain, which I correctly interpreted to mean that there would be 7 good years, followed by 7 years of famine. The Pharaoh was so impressed that my God had made this known to me that he appointed me in charge of his palace, and all of his people were to submit to my orders. He said to me, "I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt," and he put his signet ring on my finger. So there I was, a Hebrew, as the Pharaoh's second in command in Egypt, the first and only time this would ever occur.
Well, that's really unbelievable. Now let's get back to your brothers. So they didn't know what happened to you after they sold you off?
Well, that's the other part of my story. My brothers came from Canaan to buy food due to the 7 years of famine. They didn't recognize me. I pretended they were spies and spoke to them in Egyptian through an interpreter. They were afraid they'd be punished because I asked them to bring their youngest brother to me, which of course they couldn't do.
Then what?
Well, at this point I went off and wept and wept. I sent them back to our father Jacob in Canaan with their original pieces of silver in their sacks. Jacob sent them back to me with honey, spices, myrrh, and nuts to give to me as gifts. I wept at the sight of my real brother Benjamin. I gave them all food and had my steward put each of their silver back in their sacks. My brothers were terrified again. Their guilt had overcome them, and they thought they'd be put into slavery.
Then I think you felt sorry for them.
I could no longer control myself. I sent my servants away and wept again. I asked my brothers to come closer and said to them, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. But don't be angry, because God sent me ahead of you to save your lives during the famine." I asked them to go back and bring our father Jacob to come live in the Goshen region with his children, flocks, and herds and be near me, because there were 5 years of famine still to come. I kissed all my brothers and wept over them.
Wow.
The Pharaoh heard the news and was so pleased. He told me to tell my brothers to load up their donkeys with the best things of Egypt, return to Canaan, bring the families back, and he would give us land. So it was written, and so it was done.
Well, thank you, Joseph, for that remarkable tale of brotherly forgiveness. This is Pamela Bluewater for J&S Biblical saying good afternoon. Good afternoon. This is Pamela Bluewater with J&S Biblical Productions. Now that we have heard the story of Joseph and his brothers, it seems that there are some lessons we can learn for today, even though this story is several thousand years ago. We have invited Mary Beth Violet from the Church of the Open Window to the studio to discuss what we should learn from this story. Welcome, Mary Beth.
Thanks for having me.
So, Mary Beth, what do you see that is coming from the story of Joseph and his brothers in the book of Genesis, chapters 37 through 45?
Well, Miss Bluewater, it should be apparent that Joseph experienced God's presence and protection in the midst of several adversities, and you noticed he never complained.
Okay. So can you tell us about that?
Well, as the story begins, there's a rampart jealousy toward Joseph from all of his brothers because they seemed to be jealous because he was his father's favorite. And then he had all these dreams that he was bowing down to him, which then made his brothers even more antagonistic. But Joseph didn't mind, and he didn't say anything to his father about any of it.
Okay, so do you see that there are some lessons for us today that we can learn from his behavior?
Actually, quite a few things. So all through Joseph's life, he was very productive. He, as a teenager, worked tending his sheep when he was a slave at Potiphar's house, and he managed the food crisis in Egypt. So this is saying that, you have to do best in your life in every aspect of life.
Mm-hmm. So what about God in this story?
So God protected him in the midst of all his troubles, and he remained faithful to God, and in return, the Lord protected him. And when Potiphar's wife accused him of seducing her, Joseph ran away and, ended up in prison. But then he wound up being the right-hand man to the Pharaoh in Egypt, and he interpreted his dreams. But there's much more than just the story of events that happened.
Go on, what is that?
It was Joseph's unquestionable character and wisdom that he was able to save two nations from starvation, Israel and Egypt. And that's an example of promotion and prosperity will come through in the end, if you work hard and being fair, in all your dealings. So one needs to be diligent and pursue a relationship with God first, to be blessed, in everything you do in the workplace.
Okay. Well, that is very awesome and important. Is there anything else about this character?
Yes. We should learn from the part where Joseph forgave his brothers for selling him into slavery, and he chose forgiveness over resentment and wept and embraced them at the end and returned their money and then gave them grain for free.
Okay. Any more? Do you have a conclusion?
Yes, the life of Joseph demonstrates God's ability to transform undeserved adversities into a positive result. And lastly, and most important, God is in control, even when it seems that your world is out of control.
Well, thank you very much, Mary Beth Violet. You always have a zinger to conclude with. This is Pamela Bluewater with J&S saying, let's remember Joseph's character, wisdom, forgiveness, and that God is always in control, even when it is not obvious. Good afternoon.
What are your thoughts on today's story? We'd like to know. So, leave a comment and subscribe to our channel, J&S Authentic Biblical Productions. Whether it's the Word of God through parables, true stories illustrating parables, or true stories in the life of Jesus Christ with commentary, you can see them all by subscribing to the most comprehensive collection of videos of biblical stories for you and your family. Have a blessed day.